Are we live? I feel like I have to do something crazy at the beginning of this podcast to get everyone's attention. Welcome to the Bottom Line with Kristen Rosen-Gonzalez. It's Tuesday, April 13th. I had the J&J vaccine a couple of weeks ago, so you can imagine how I feel right now after the CDC came out and said that they were nervous. But, 6.8 million vaccines distributed and 6 cases. I mean, every life is important. But so far, no clots. I feel good. Today is election day in the city of Coral Gables, and my friend Tanya Cruz Jimenez is running. I think there are 2 commission seats up and the mayoral seat. It will be very interesting to see who wins. I don't have a list of the long candidates, but good luck to all of those candidates because it's never easy running for office. And a special little shout out to Tanya Cruz Jimenez. If you are a Coral Gables resident and have not yet voted, please go to the polls, get to the Coral Gables library immediately and vote. Another announcement, Cafe Bernie. Our waterfront chef Bernie Matz's waterfront creation. April 22nd we're shooting for that to be our opening day. And we're very excited about it. We are still working out some permits. And but soon we will be coming to Miami Beach waterfront dining that doesn't break the bank. It's a casual, unpretentious, just good feelings and a wonderful view with the storied Miami Beach Indian Creek in the background and Bernie Matz's delicious food. So stay tuned for when we open. I'm going to be wearing this t-shirt until then, which is kind of like wearing a campaign t-shirt, kind of similar. So today we have a very interesting show. About 3 weeks ago in Miami Beach, we declared a state of emergency and instituted an 8 p.m. curfew in our MXC, which is the entertainment district of Miami Beach in South Beach. We had a curfew. We shut down the causeways. 3 weeks later, the curfew has been lifted. The city is calm. The MXC district, the entertainment still has specific restrictions. And it appears that the administration has regained control of the streets. The question is, for how long? Our MO has traditionally been to react when we have a problem instead of being proactive. And we forget very easily that our streets become clogged with thousands of revelers and partygoers, and we completely lose control and our city gets trashed and it's unsafe. And like this poor woman, Christine Engelhardt, who was drugged and raped and left to die while some party animals stole her cell phone and partied with her credit cards. We cannot forget, which is why today we are very lucky because he is a resident because he does live in Miami Beach. Jonathan Plutzik. He is the owner of the Betsy Hotel, but so much more. The former chairman of Credit Suisse, First Boston, former chairman of the federal Fannie Mae loaning program. So he is a very impressive man. And the Betsy Hotel is a cultural icon. You can go there to see chamber music, poetry readings. It has a life all to it. So all of the events are free. So he has an award-winning hotel. It is right on Ocean Drive. It is right in the heart of Ground Zero on 14th Street. All of these restrictions are also applied to the Betsy Hotel. And I am very grateful that Jonathan is here with us today. Oh, currently, Jonathan is the chair of the Ocean Drive Task Force, and he is also chair of the Ocean Drive Association. The Ocean Drive Task Force is the mayor's political committee, and the Ocean Drive Association is private commercial interest. So welcome, Jonathan.
Kristen, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much for coming on the show because I know that I tend to be sometimes extremist and somewhat controversial. And I know that it could be nerve-wracking because you are balancing both sides, literally, as chair. You are representing commercial interests and you are representing political interest. What is it like right now to be Jonathan Plutzik at the Betsy Hotel in the midst of all this chaos?
Well, first of all, you left out one category that I also represent, which is residential interests. You said commercial and political interests.
And you are a resident of Miami Beach, correct?
Not only am I a resident, I think one of the things that I try to spend a lot of time doing is trying to change the narrative around who's involved in this conversation. Because the reality is there are so many things, if we let ourselves kind of be open, there's so many things that actually residents, of which I'm one, and business owners, of which I am one, actually have completely common ground. And that we frankly shouldn't presume entering every conversation that people are on one side or the other, when in fact there's tons of overlap. I don't want to, when I say that, by the way, I don't want to be naive, because there are areas of disagreement. By the way, there are areas of disagreement between the businesses. So it's not just business versus resident, it's business versus business. Not all residents have the same views. It's much more complicated. And I think we give it like short shrift when we try to oversimplify and say, we got just like people on one side of the room or the other. It's much more complicated than that.
That's interesting, because when we held the protest in front of City Hall, believe it or not, there were commercial interests who were there holding signs saying, shut the party down. So there are certain commercial interests also that would like to see a proactive plan instead of just shutting everything down.
You reinforced my point exactly. I mean, absolutely. It's much more complicated than just us versus them, whoever us are and whoever them is.
No, we are a community. Tommy, would you come here? I just have to watch part of this, Jonathan. I'm sorry for interrupting this conversation, but I got to alert everybody. It's 32190. So you're representing everything. I was with you a couple of weeks ago on the patio at the Sidewalk Cafe of the Betsy Hotel, which is lovely and calm. And, Ocean Drive is so idyllic and beautiful. But that doesn't seem to be the case as in the wee hours or as the evening progresses. So how is it right now? What are the restrictions currently in place? And what is the overall, like if I were to walk down Ocean Drive, which I'm sure you do daily, what would we see?
Well, the current restrictions, I mean, we're in the middle of the week now, so the restrictions don't really exist. I guess there's technically a midnight curfew, I guess, although I'm not even certain about that. The past weekend, we had a midnight curfew, but restaurants needed to close by 8 o'clock.
It's kind of hard to keep up with all of it. So, okay.
Well, it's been evolving. By the way, it should evolve because conditions change. But I've been telling this story because I do think we kind of lump everything together sometimes. And I may have mentioned this to you, but I was asked to do an interview with the CBS Evening News on the 22nd of March, which was right in the middle of some of our challenges. And I said, after a little bit of contemplation, sure, I'll do it. And they said, come down to 6th and Ocean to do the interview. And I said, well, thank you very much. If you want to talk to me, you got to come up to 14th and Ocean. Because
why didn't you want to go down to 6th? Because it's just too chaotic down there?
Because I was there to tell a story that I wanted to tell in my own home, if you will. I wasn't promoting the Betsy, but the significance of the story is, and by the way, when they're asking me to come, I don't know what's happening at 6th and Ocean. But what was striking was when they got up to the Betsy, they basically said, sort of this crew of 6 of audio and, camera guys and so forth, holy smokes, there's nothing going on here. It's completely quiet. And I think one of the misconceptions that we spread around is how pervasive, the challenge is. Every block is different. And by the way, which is not to minimize what was going on at 6th and Ocean that evening or the previous evening. I'm not minimizing that at all, but we do actually have to understand, and we had many guests who were concerned about being there. And then, we got reviews where people said I was scared, but actually it turned out to be lovely. So it's challenging because it is a block by block thing. And we obviously didn't get it right. We didn't get it right as a community on the lower part of Ocean Drive, period.
So the Betsy is one of the only places that I go to on Ocean Drive anymore. It really is. And what do you think makes the Betsy different than all, apart from you and your lovely wife, Leslie, and that it's a family-owned business and the cultural component? Is it the room rate? Is it because the Betsy is high end versus some of these lower end hotels that are charging $100 a night. Like if I were to check into the Betsy today, what would it cost me?
Well, it would cost you more than $100 a night. But I, no, certainly there's no question. I mean, one of the issues in our community, a community, by the way, that has a Betsy, but also has a One and a W and a Faina and et cetera. I don't mean to leave anybody out. But it also has, short-term rentals where people can rent a room for $125 a night and have, that has no check-in desk, that has no security, that has no oversight, and people can sleep 4, 6, or 8 to a room. That creates, a different kind of environment, obviously, when that's happening right next door to some of the most luxurious hotels in the world. That's a really complicated social issue because everyone, talks about gentrification, the complexity of it. But Miami Beach is a very complicated place because we have some of the most interesting and interested, and yes, some of the most affluent too. We don't want just affluent, but we have that too. And we're a little bit betwixt and between because many of our buildings are not in great shape. And their only current use is, frankly, in this kind of lower end context.
So I've always said that we are a tale of two cities. We're incredibly diverse. There's something for everyone in Miami Beach. And I love that aspect of it.
Sure.
But recently, tied to this socioeconomic component is just out of control partying and anything goes, which is why I helped that service worker, South Beach bartender, Tanya Dean, hold this protest that, by the way, we got a lot of media in that protest. And there was a lot of momentum among residents or commercial interests that did want to definitively see a change. And what we did see was the mayor came out with his 12-point plan. It's not the first plan because I remember when you were the head of it wasn't the task force. It was the mayor's blue ribbon Ocean Drive panel that you chaired for many, many years ago for 2 years. And you guys had come up with 30 suggestions that were never implemented. Now we have 12 points. I thought what we could do today is go through each one and we could discuss it very briefly to see, are these points valid? Could they actually be enforced and implemented? Is this a realistic plan? It's an ideal plan. The question is, can Miami Beach actually execute it? Right? You can have all the plans in the world, but if if you can't execute them, then they're worthless. Correct?
Yes, well, and I would say, by the way, that not all, and we'll go through it, not all of those 12-point plans are actually in the control of the city. The short-term rental element of it, for example, is constrained by state law and so forth. The cities try to do things, work temporarily, and then they were constrained by the courts, et cetera. So it's complicated, but in general, the plan has a lot of elements that that I personally embrace and that I think are, could be made substantial progress on in a short period of time.
If I were in charge, I would have called up the governor and said, hey, why don't you come down and let's take a little walk on Ocean Drive and let's see how some of these statewide laws where you've preempted cities from regulating short-term rentals, let's see how they're affecting municipalities, not just in Miami Beach, but across the state of Florida. And it is not one size fits all, even at the state level. So I do think that the governor probably needs to look into this and figure out how to allow us to regulate short-term rentals. I understand that, his policy is just business all the time. But when it's chaos, and people were saying, when all those videos were coming out, people kept saying, we need to call in the armed guard or, so that's kind of scary when those things are being said. So let's go to the points here. Number 1, liquor license reform, including a change in last call to 2 a.m. So my editorialization of this is we've been under a 12 a.m. curfew for most of the year, and that hasn't seemed to work or had any effect. What will 2 a.m. overall accomplish? Do you believe that 2 a.m. will really have any effect on the current situation?
Sure. Well, the language there is more complicated and nuanced than you just expressed it. Not that you were doing it wrong. I'm just saying it's a paragraph that's got a bunch of things. One of which it says, we got a lot of liquor establishments, places that sell liquor. And, we have a lot of liquor stores in South Beach. The question is, how many do we need? By the way, we certainly want to serve residents who want to buy a nice bottle of wine to have with dinner. We're less interested in selling, 14 hours a day to young men and women who want to buy liquor and drink it out of the back of their cars or in the street. And that's complicated and needs to be thought through correctly. We have certain drugstores that sell single serve beer, and that's a challenge as well. That's an important business for the Walgreens and CVS's of the world, and we have them in our community. So there's that whole liquor sale, at retail, which is, relevant to this conversation.
Well, and that's why it's kind of,
what's that?
Had to restrict it to the MXC district, because when we did try to restrict alcohol across the city, somebody would be at Whole Foods at 8 a.m. and say, hey, I'm having a dinner party tonight and I couldn't buy a bottle of wine. So that's why the MXC district gets picked on. But there are 170 package stores is it in the MXC district? 170?
No, I don't. It's not clear to me what that 170 refers to, so I don't really want to be that precise. But I would say, I believe, I don't understand. First of all, you can't have a system where you restrict it in the MXC, but if you go up to 28th Street, you can buy the liquor and come back down into the MXC. That doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make common sense. So I think if we have standards around liquor stores, or standards,
but Jonathan, if there's no problem, I'm sorry that I keep interrupting you.
That's all right.
Okay. If there's no problem at 28th Street, but there's a real problem on 6th Street, then I can understand why the MXC would be restricted. Can't you?
Actually, with respect, Chris, is not what I said. I said we can't have a circumstance where somebody could go buy it at 28th Street, just outside the envelope. We're talking about buying a bottle of liquor and putting it in your bag, okay, or in your car, and then drinking it. Well, obviously, if we're trying to solve a problem that exists most intensely in the historic MXC, which I prefer to be the Art Deco Cultural District, we don't solve that problem because we don't fence the problem. We don't solve the problem by saying, well, we're all good, below 20 or 16th Street or 17th Street or 23rd Street, whatever we pick, but just outside on 24th Street, knock yourselves out, buy whatever you want. It seems to me that if we actually want to solve the narrow problem, which is not narrow but not unimportant, of people drinking, trying to enforce the open container laws and trying to prevent people from drinking out of their cars or whatever, drinking in the streets, we have to think about it more broadly than just the MXC, because look, the people that were hanging in the MXC at 1 o'clock in the morning weren't all from the MXC. They were staying all over Miami Beach.
But that to me seems impossible, because I could easily go to city of Miami. Let's say the Miami Beach restricts alcohol sales. You could go anywhere and buy alcohol and put it in your bag and then drive to the city of Miami Beach. So
all I can do is advocate for what the people who are elected in the place I live should do. And you're asking me, and I'm saying, by the way, oddly enough, I'm arguing that we should be more restrictive, not less. And you're telling me that we should be less restrictive. I'm simply saying that if we have a bottle law, if we have a retail liquor restriction, whatever it is the commission decides to do, I don't see why it would make sense only to have it in a particular few blocks and not have it include the blocks just outside the Art Deco Cultural District if we're actually going to make it effective. Because if someone can walk or ride on their bicycle 2 blocks out of the way and buy the liquor anyway, that's not going to restrict anything. It's not going to be effective.
Can you shut these shops down, Jonathan? Let's say that they pass a law. Like, you must have 3,000 square feet and able to be able to sell liquor, right? Or something like that. Let's say that they do it by square footage, because that's the only way I could see that they could regulate something like that. So they, would those guys go out of business? Can we put, what would they do? I mean, would they be grandfathered in? And then when they wanted to change anything?
I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a legislator, and I'm not actually advocating for a particular set of laws.
He's a prohibitionist, everyone. You heard it. No, I'm just kidding, Jonathan. I'm kidding.
I was only saying that whatever rules you make
Mhm.
for the MXE, whatever those are, I presume there are things that you think should be done in the MXE. Whatever those are, should apply citywide. That's all I was saying. So
Okay.
whatever you think, Kristen, whatever you think is appropriate, I'm in, and that should be applied citywide.
I see. No, listen, I'm not a legislator either. I'm trying to figure all of this out. I know all
Yeah.
of those Israeli guys, a lot of them are owned by these really nice, fun, guys that have been there for decades. And it makes me feel very sad that they could lose their livelihood. I hate the idea of losing their livelihood, but at the same time,
I
if we
don't.
can't control it,
I'm not saying, just to be clear, just so because I was getting confusion. I'm not arguing that those stores should be closed. We weren't actually debating a specific legislative outcome. I wasn't arguing they should be closed.
This is just an erudite discussion
No, I
surrounding.
was simply saying whatever you think's appropriate, and we can debate what you think is appropriate. It shouldn't be, because it's silly to say it should end on 16th Street if someone can walk to 17th Street and do whatever we thought was bad.
Okay,
whatever
so
that is.
Along those lines,
Yeah.
prohibiting certain areas with exemptions and not. That brings us to point 2, which is the elimination of noise exemptions, because there is an area from 9th to 11th Street that they can make as much noise as they want and everyone else on the street can't. That's not fair. You're saying that it's not fair and it should be applied to everybody. So the elimination of noise would be number 2 across the board, because I think that's what creates that strip-like circus, to quote Mitch, what does he call it? The circus-like atmosphere of Ocean Drive?
Oh, or something like that.
Something like
Probably
that.
more intense than that coming from Mr. Novick, but
so they're going to
no,
have to eliminate the
think-
exemption.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Are you in favor of eliminating the noise exemption from 9th to 11th?
I think all businesses should be treated the same. And let me be clear. I speak for myself. I do chair these organizations. I don't speak for them. I may at some point in the future in a formal way, but for myself, I think. By the way, I imagine a future on Ocean Drive. It's the greatest street, maybe one of the greatest streets in America. Not today, but has the potential to be. It has the raw materials to be. And
$30 million waiting to. We have $30 million waiting to beautify it, correct?
Well, we have $20 million for Ocean Drive, the street, and we have $5 million for Loomis Park, geo bond money. But to really make it work, we need to attract a lot of private capital, because none of the money we're talking about, the 20 million and the 5 million, can be used on the buildings. We need to find people who want to invest in those buildings and turn the ones that are not in great shape into something productive.
So putting your investor cap on right now,
Yeah.
Why would somebody want to invest in Ocean Drive right now? Do you feel like the prices are inflated? Have all of these rowdy crowds and bad press depressed those prices? I know the prices across the rest of Miami Beach are booming, especially in the mid-beach area, single family waterfront homes and high-end hotels and condos like the Faena south of 5th. What's going on with the property prices in Ocean Drive, on Ocean Drive and in the MXE?
Well, I went to my first conference about 2 weeks ago, in-person conference that I'd been to in a year at the Mandarin downtown, hotel investment conference. And I was on a panel. I was a little guy on a panel with a bunch of big guys. And the big guy next to me, who invests in hotels all over the world, said to the crowd, there's no place in the world that he'd rather invest in a hotel than on Ocean Drive.
Really?
Period.
Because it's one of the most beautiful beaches. It's one of the only
Yeah.
beaches apart from the west coast of Florida where you really do feel like you're in the Caribbean. It's so gorgeous when you're there. You feel the magic. You feel the energy. And
Look,
you get
I say it all the time. First of all, the Loomis Park Beach is one of the great beaches in the world, period. Period. The width of it, the amount of sand, all that stuff. The Loomis Park, the architecture, the street, the neighborhood we're in, all the arts and culture things that are within 15 minutes of the Betsy. This is one of the great streets in America. We haven't taken care of it correctly, but there'll be plenty of people who want to invest there when I say invest there, it's really in Ocean Collins and Washington, because they're kind of no one's going to touch the architecture of Ocean Drive. That's never going to happen. It's how do you, and that's one of the other 12 points, how do you, think creatively about zoning and FAR with some of the Collins Avenue properties to encourage investment on Ocean Drive.
Well, then that leads up to number 3, and we're going to actually have to pick up the pace because we're going to
sure.
put everybody. We're going to make everybody fall asleep if we go through all topics. Okay. Let's see. Update our land regulations to encourage live, work, play. You're saying we need new land? No, the Mayor Gelber's plan says that we need new land regulations. You think that's going to be possible? You've seen what happens when we try to change zoning here. You know, everybody. Just like you said, different factions are so divided. It normally doesn't happen. We go through the whole dance and then nothing comes of it.
If you're asking me what I think should be done as compared to what can be done, what should be done.
Well, you're there all day, so looking at it.
We have to sit and think creatively with residents and zoning experts and architects and others to figure out how we.
Question: what about? I know that one of the largest property owners. I know you froze up.
I'm sorry, I hear you now. Can you hear me?
We're losing our connection.
It came and we're back on again, I think.
Was that just because it was controversial? I was about to say something really controversial and then you froze.
No, go ahead.
No. South Beach Hotel Group owns, maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 hotels in that area. What, do you think those are the cheaper hotels, the ones offering $40, $50 per room nights? I mean, I don't think any other hotelier in the area wants to see those cheap room rates. I don't even think South Beach Hotel Group wants to see those cheap room rates. How do we get those types of hotels, the ones that really either need a renovation or need to change their marketing? How do we give them land regulations to incentivize them to either sell their properties or upgrade their properties or change their business model? Because that business model really doesn't work.
Sure. Well,
it works. It's just uncontrollable.
You were expressed concern about putting people to sleep, so I want to be careful about spending too much time on this, other than to say we should define what we want. By the way, we don't want a bunch of new small hotel rooms. Okay, we want better restaurants. We want some residential alternatives. We may want some Class A office space in the appropriate places, like has been contemplated now at the Bancroft, which we support. We need to look at it comprehensively and say, how can we create some incentives to get people to do the right thing? And those incentives should reflect the interests of residents and the input of smart people in real estate.
I hope that the Miami Design Preservation League can really work with the city and come up with something that works. Like maybe you are able to convert these hotels into luxury condominiums, like one floor each. I don't know. There's got to be creative ways to change the business model. I would even advocate for that. And I'm always on the side of preservation. I love to maintain.
I'm on the side of preservation too. It's why I'm on Ocean Drive. But I think if we did this correctly, we'd end up on the other side preserving all that's important to us and attracting money, because we got to do this with other people's money. It's not government money. We got to attract capital to want to do this work to make our neighborhoods better, period.
Well, the investors would say, look, the price per square footage doesn't make any sense because I can't build enough to make money. So that's one of the problems that we have. And nobody really wants to talk about that. But, the question is, how big of a profit do you need to have? I mean, you've taken the Betsy and renovated it, and it's a historic hotel. And you have, I'm pretty sure, high room rates because you guys are hoity-toity, very elegant, though. Beautiful at the Betsy. Not pretentious at all, but very elegant and luxurious. And so you have a higher room rate. Why couldn't we? I mean, smaller doesn't have to mean less luxurious, right? I just don't understand how we get there.
Yes, actually, it's complicated. We have 130 rooms at the Betsy. We have 25,000 square feet of event and restaurant space. That's what makes the engine all go at all the pieces of the puzzle. It's very hard to be a very little building with a bunch of little rooms, no real kitchen, no access to the roof. I mean, it needs to have attributes that make it work so you can sell at higher rates and create a certain kind of environment. That might mean that we as a community, residents, business folks, investors, say, you know what? We would be okay. I'm making it up here, Kristen. I'm not proposing. We would be okay if we permitted 5-story additional construction on Collins Avenue, set back from Ocean Drive, to make some of those Ocean Drive properties economically viable. That, you know, that would be potentially a path that would attract capital, preserve Ocean Drive and all of its architecture, create some new residential environment, some office space, et cetera, and bring that private money to work on our behalf.
So changing the story, I agree with you, by the way. And I've seen other historic hotels that have been adapted with additions onto the back of them. Although, you know, in some cases I fought when they want to put like plop a large tower down in a historic environment. I don't that ruins it. But I have seen some successful adaptations.
There's a change that's too much and there's a change that's appropriate. And we got to find out the appropriate piece.
Okay, so let's go to number 4.
Okay.
Vanilla, Jonathan. Vanilla. Okay. Heightened code of conduct for cafe operators. This basically means that, in my opinion, my interpretation of this is we don't want your big cocktails with the 2 beers in them. I've never had one of those. They just look gross and it looks like it's too much. And I heard that they charge exorbitant prices for them. And it's a horrible. Do you serve those drinks at the Betsy?
No,
can I?
We don't.
What do you call those
No.
anyway? Can I have the big cocktail with the 2 upside down beers?
Let me just say this. We are all in on good operator behavior. We want people to be rewarded for being good, and we want them to be punished for being bad. Now we have to have clear rules, obviously, so there's no confusion. You know, we were talking about sound earlier. We believe the city should establish, like the county has, clear sound standards that are measurable, you know, decibel standards, because no, that's very
so they're
simple.
going to go out in that throng of people and with their little gun and try to like regulate.
No. We advocate installing machines that are permanent. By the way, in a perfect world, data would be captured 24/7 in a central location. You could measure people's performance. One of our members has already installed such a device with a digital readout that the code can read when they walk by. There are a lot for very little money, hundreds of dollars. We want an objective standard, by the way, so everyone's feet can be held to the fire. We don't want.
By the way, we have created rules surrounding receipts. We've created rules surrounding menus. We have so many rules. I don't even know what they all are, but I sat there for years creating those rules that have not been effective. So hopefully maybe you guys will really create rules with penalties, you know, like we pull your license if you're serving the big drink.
One of the mayor's suggestions is to create a dedicated code enforcement group for the Art Deco Cultural District on that 12-point list. We support that completely.
So, all right, I'm totally up for that. I would love to see a day where we don't have, you know, the food displays or those sticky menus and the big drinks. I'm all for that. And those restaurants kind of
we are too.
Okay, good. Okay, number 5, enhancement of policing. I mean, here we are in a George Floyd, Dante Wright environment. You know, you saw last night there was a curfew in Minneapolis after, you know, a black man was shot. And, you know, so we're saying enhancement of policing. Do we have enough police? Oh, here's my question about this. If you had to grade our current police chief, what grade would you give him?
Well, it's a silly question to ask me. I happen to have deep respect for Chief Clements. I do. Okay, it's a very difficult job. Now, if you ask me what I'm interested in, I'll tell you. What I'm interested in is evidence of more and more community policing. You know, we don't see enough police walking the street. You know, a community policing model is a model that has people on the sidewalk, out of their vehicles. You know, visible presence in the community, more prevention oriented rather than enforcement oriented. So I think there are a bunch of things. And by the way, again, I'm not a law enforcement expert. My guess is we need more police, not less. But I have great respect for the guys, men and women who are out there every day. It's really, in a COVID environment, by the way, given the numbers.
Too. I just think that
it's very, very difficult. But I think they agree, and we agree, we got to go to an even better place. And my 2 cents as a non-expert is, let's figure out a way to get more men and women in uniform on our street walking the beat. That'd be my number 1 thing.
If you became police chief of Miami Beach tomorrow, what would you do in your first month to see a huge change? Like, what would you do as a transformative leader? We know that we need this change. What's the first thing that you would do?
Well, I'm going to take my fake police uniform off because I'd answer the question differently. I think there are there are a bunch of things that I think are valuable to do. I think the short-term rental thing is an important thing for our community. We have to get that right. I think some of the rental vehicles that we permit on our streets that really that's kind of stimulate bad behavior and make it very difficult for the police to enforce is something else that we have to focus on for sure. The mayor touches on that in his 12-point plan. The three-wheel vehicles and the mopeds, that move in packs, make it very difficult for our police to enforce.
Yeah, you got to get rid of them. Get rid of the mayor calls them pesky toys. I agree with him. I would get rid of the pesky toys.
Again, the only police thing that I would add, and again, I'm telling you, I just have a sense for how hard it is out there, even though I'm not on the force. But one thing that I would love to see is again more physical connection between the officer beat and the customer and resident, so they actually see them on the sidewalk. I participated in an NBU panel 2 weeks ago with the mayor of Miami Beach and the mayor of Fort Lauderdale. The mayor of Fort Lauderdale talked about mounted police as being very effective. I don't know if they are or they aren't, but that intrigued me. But again, I say this very humbly because I'm not a law enforcement expert, but I think, even our chief would agree that there are things that he's kicking at to make it all work better.
I don't know if I was a police officer, if I'd want to go out on a mounted, elevated, poor animal in a crowd of tens of thousands outnumbered to police. But, it could work. It could work.
Well, that was
the mayor of Fort Lauderdale. Okay, let's go to the next one.
Okay, sure.
Dedicated code enforcement unit for South Beach. Okay. What is, in your opinion, the worst code violation that we are currently not enforcing in Miami Beach?
Well, again, you make it hard. Let me say this. I'm going to answer your question this way. In our little Art Deco Cultural District panel that we meet every 2 weeks, everyone is welcome to join us on Fridays, 11 o'clock. We set out to have a 12-month plan per the mayor's direction to us. And, we're working on that, but we've accelerated it given all that's going on in the city. But what we've also done is we set out in the very early days to create a to-do list of things immediately, like 45 actions in 45 days. The list now has 95 items on it, because I believe deeply, to answer your question, that there are tons of little things that we need to do that are lighting, that are painting, graffiti painting, holding operators and building owners' feet to the fire about, maintaining their buildings in visible ways. We could lift our community up in meaningful ways in a short time frame. And I'm pleased that we're partnering with the city manager's staff to get after those 95 things as rapidly as we can. So to answer your question is, again, I've talked about, these vehicles and short-term rentals and that sort of thing. But I think there's a great opportunity for us in a matter of weeks to choose a bunch of little steps that cumulatively will have us feeling like we're making an impact beyond the big issues.
All right. Okay. So little steps, small wins add up to large gains, right?
I believe that deeply, because otherwise we say to ourselves, well, why are we bothering? It's a little thing. But actually, if you do 95 little things.
It's John Cotter who says celebrate those little small wins. I mean, even if we got the buggies off the street. So we have some people who wrote comments here. Elizabeth Scarlett said 100% code enforcement. I agree. Only I think that they're exhausted and they have thousands of pages of code. Susan Clarendon says, who is the woman conducting this interview? Why? My name's Kristen Rosen Gonzalez. I'm a former commissioner in Miami Beach. I consider myself a political activist, and I'm a professor at Miami-Dade College who wants to make Miami Beach safe. And I'm very grateful to have Jonathan Plutzik here, who has agreed to allow me to interview him today. And Elizabeth says more police visibility, which is what Jonathan Plutzik says. By the way, Jonathan, question. What does Plutz stand for? I know what Putz stands for, but what is Plutz in
Plutzik?
German? Plutzik?
Well, kind of. I think the derivation is probably place, Eastern European.
Okay.
I come from Eastern European stock. So.
Me too. Okay. Jonathan's father was a famous poet, Chaim Plutzik, who was professor at Yale and then Rochester. See, I did my research. Okay. Let's go. We have 4 more to go. 5 more to go. Okay. Number 7 in the plan. Better preparation for high impact moments. Well, we do that every year. We say that we're prepared and then we fail and then we go back again. It's like perennial failure, right? So how could we better prepare? I mean, more so than we have. I mean, I think you're in meetings all day long preparing for this, right?
Well, I think, first of all, no one pats themselves on the back for the tough weekends that occurred. So I think one of the lessons, and again, I am not the expert, and we have elected and appointed officials who are, but clearly they reached the conclusion, which I support, which is that we establish clearer curfew deadlines, earlier curfew deadlines, which seems to have discouraged a bunch of people from coming. And so we've had some quiet weekends, and I think we learned from that. I know, by the way, because I left the city and drove back in on one of those early weekends, the police presence was pervasive. You couldn't even get into the MXC. Every street was blocked by a police officer. So the police were out in force, but the reality is that the later curfew in those early days permitted people to come in and hang out. The earlier curfew permitted the police, as they have now, to clear the streets. And I hope, now I speak as a business owner, worried about being a resident too, that we can fine tune the mix between curfew and when restaurants have to close, because and what days of the week, it has to be applied, all of those things. And as I am certain, because I hear the whispering, that we're going to know quite soon what the city plans for Memorial Day, far in advance of Memorial Day. And
the 8 p.m. curfew seemed to work.
That wasn't the case. That wasn't the case for spring break, which, by the way, I like to refer to as spring vacation because it makes me happier. But spring break, we didn't know too far in advance, and I think everyone regrets that. Should have been done sooner. And that's, by the way, what the mayor's saying, I think.
Well, we've known every year. But you know what? The curfew did work. I congratulate Raul for the 8 p.m. curfew. That was very gutsy of him, but the right thing to do because it really was unsafe and it really did shut down this party that we can't control. Okay, number 8 is regulate the pesky toys. That's right. We agreed on that one, so we can just bypass that. Those should go. Okay, number 9, increase technology deployment. You mean like cameras, right? Have a camera, more cameras everywhere?
Yeah, more cameras and more communication that we have cameras and more monitoring of cameras, and other license plate readers. I mean, we know that there is technology that can help us that if we disclose it is perfectly appropriate to use.
We should put big signs up. We have license plate readers and cameras everywhere in the city. I mean, who wants to come on vacation with that? But unfortunately, I guess that's maybe signage.
Well, actually, I don't. Again, we do have cameras up and down Ocean Drive. By the way, I think the police have announced, the city's announced they're accelerating, their installation of the monitoring stuff and so forth. I don't think it'll discourage any tourists from coming. In fact, if you go to places like London, filled with cameras, no one cares.
Monte Carlo has signs on every single street corner that says you're being watched.
Yes, exactly.
Really? Yes. Yeah. So, what's interesting, and this happened when I was in Monte Carlo recently, actually this past year, they shut down your cell phone service when you're not a Monegasque resident. Like you go into Monte Carlo and it just like shuts down your communication, which makes it not as much fun to be there. And people who might just be passing through and not residents there who have access to their cell phones and data all the time, you kind of just want to get out and you can't Uber. Okay, so you have to take these exorbitant taxis, which I don't know if you've ever spent time in the south of France, but like to get out of Monte Carlo, you have to spend like 80 to 100 euro just to leave the country. So, I mean, they've really implemented very strict laws to protect their residents. I mean, I know that we're in America. We're not a small principality.
Well, and also it's not uncomplicated because there are a lot of lovely people, tourists, residents, whose phones would be shut off also because they're actually resident someplace else some of the year. So it's a complicated step. I agree with you. We've begun to look at data at the Art Deco Cultural District Committee because we learn a lot of things from cell phone data. We had a presentation on it, which I encourage people to look at.
Actually, they don't cut off your cell phone data. What they do is they institute like a roaming charge. So when you come into the city, you
Yeah.
all of a sudden you have this like huge roaming charge, which I don't know. It's just one way that they've done. Okay,
Yeah.
let's go on to number 10.
Okay.
Pedestrianization, cars or no cars on Ocean Drive.
Look, I think, in general, first of all, this is a perfect example of
Black and white.
where people are in surprising places. I again chaired a recent committee meeting, Ocean Drive Art Deco Cultural District Committee meeting, where I heard a developer say pedestrianization, and I heard Mitch Novak, to my surprise, said no, we should have cars back, which ran counter to what I would think Mitch would think, but Mitch is entitled to his view. I think in general, my view is consistent with what the mayor's written, but the future of Ocean Drive is a great promenade with higher end cafes. And I must say, over time, and this is not science, this is just an observation, as I've talked to people who, when it first closed, were anti it, acknowledge today that people really seem to be enjoying it. I think the other part of the equation, which we must solve for, by the way, for residents, for businesses, for everybody, is it's not just simply closing the street. You got to actually do the other pieces of the puzzle as well. Where does the valet go? How are deliveries made? Where do the shared car services pick you up? It needs to be really comprehensive to work. And we did the easy part, which was just close the doors, which was COVID emergency related.
It just seems like these are a lot of regulations that are going to be difficult to figure out over time just to shut down this party. Hours of operation are the easiest way. We shut it down the hours, and Mayor Trentalis said that too. He said shutting down alcohol.
I actually don't think some of this stuff, if you go to Amazon or Cisco, the food delivery company, and say, help us figure out the better logistics so we have fewer big trucks, more smaller trucks, less whatever. There are people who are, we think of ourselves as terribly unique. We're Miami Beach, after all, and no one's like Miami Beach. Well, by the way, there are great cities all over the world wrestling with these issues. We need to pick the best brains in the world. We're trying to find the answers that apply to us. Everybody, every major city in the country, in the world, is going through this pedestrianization question, taking historical vehicular roads, traffic roads, out of circulation. How do you do it? What's the best way to do it? Do you use bollards that go up and down? All of that stuff is complicated, but there are a lot of people to learn from.
I have no problem with it being pedestrianization, but I agree with what Elizabeth Scarlett wrote right here, which is open container enforcement and prohibited uses. I've seen guys just walking down the street with whiskey bottles open past police officers, and I don't blame them for not engaging, because who wants to tell somebody who's already drank half a bottle of whiskey to put it away, especially when, they might be bigger or taller than they are. They could, people don't want to engage in that kind of conflict. So it's going to be hard to enforce. Okay. We've come to the final two.
Let me, Kristen, I'll be quick.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's why the solution has to be comprehensive. We can't say it's okay to have liquor stores everywhere, open all hours, and be mad about open container. We need to, we have to constrain behavior of cafe operators, liquor stores, people who make too much noise. Everyone's going to have to, be challenged a little bit, but I think, frankly, come out the other end in a much happier, more successful, more profitable, more residential friendly place.
Well, ideally, I just feel like we're having the same conversation. It's just dressed in different laws, than it was 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, I hope that this plan works. I want to be optimistic about it. And I think we are getting to a point where we're going to take drastic action surrounding these types of businesses. Also, Irene Bigger, who lives across the street from you, who you were speaking to that day, she mentioned to me that, the new BTRs that the new businesses on Washington Avenue were all like tattoo parlors or package stores or vape shops. And, how can you encourage different types of businesses? So it's not anti-business, though. It's interesting. Like, if you criticize the types of businesses, all of a sudden, are you anti-commercial? And you're not. You just want a reinvention. And I do like the way that you guys have started to call it the ADCD.
Yeah.
So, okay. Next one, increased budget for year-round cultural festivals and supporting. I feel like we've thrown a lot of money at this. We did some stuff at the Betsy, didn't we? Along with the, a few years ago.
Yes. I mean, the Betsy itself of its own money, has spent a tremendous amount of money promoting arts and cultural stuff. Again, I made a presentation, probably to you as a commissioner, when I chaired the previous thing. I said Loomis Park should be one of the great urban parks in the world. And at the moment, I would use a profanity here, but I'm being polite. It's not. It's terrible. It's nothing. It's just in the perfect place. So we have to find ways to activate 365 days a year in ways that engage residents and tourists and make for a better, happier, Art Deco cultural district and Miami Beach. I'm all in on it.
But do we have to do that? Because I don't see other small barrier islands wanting to activate, their parks. I understand that given the situation, programming does work when you host an event or we have the convention center up and operating. We're not attracting the partygoers like we are normally. But, in this case, like to program I suppose we could try to program our way out of it. And I could see, I know that the Christmas decorations in Loomis Park made a big difference when we had those displays and people were taking pictures there. That was very successful, in illuminating and activating. So that did work.
Look, one of the advisors to the Art Deco Cultural District Committee that's part of the Bernard Ziskovich team is Jerome Barth. Jerome works in New York. Jerome was part of the team that did Bryant Park, for those of you who may know about Bryant Park, which was a drug-infested, terrible place that now attracts, these are neighborhood attracts. He was part of the team that did the High Line in New York. The reality is, the devil's in the details. I think by your comments, Kristen, you were thinking about like rock concerts. I don't think it's rock concerts or, by the way, it's big and little things. It's more volleyball, it's chess sets, it's shuffleboard, it's art shows, it's all kinds of things, not just big events. It's tons of small events also, but in a very thoughtful way. In the history of Miami Beach, we had a concert 2 July 4ths ago, Miami Beach Classical Music Festival, which, by the way, resides at the Betsy. Fantastic guy, which we don't have time to talk about today. But that concert, we had 5,000 people in Loomis Park listening to a full symphony orchestra and 8 opera singers. 5,000 people with their lawn chairs. By the way,
in Loomis Park.
Pardon me? In
Loomis Park?
Yes, in Loomis Park with fireworks. It was unbelievable. By the way, we have tremendous potential. So when you read that language, don't assume it's directed toward how do we do a big rock concert or whatever kind of concert.
I'm thinking more like Coney Island. Like, I don't want it to become like a Coney Island atmosphere.
That's not. Look at the models around the world. Obviously, it's in the details. But when I think of what the mayor is saying in that language, it's not about crazy stuff. It's about stuff that elevates our community further and brands our community for being what it actually is, and reflection of those who live here and those who visit here.
Well, I think it's a tall order to program the entire to program it, but I think we could get there, especially. And I can't see a better way to spend tourist dollars than great cultural festivals and programming. Right. I agree with you on that. Which brings us. So, by the way, you have a question, Susan Clarendon. Where can we access the presentation Jonathan mentioned that was made to the cultural group? How cell phone data is used in South Beach? Where can that presentation be accessed?
Right. If you go to the City of Miami Beach website, you can probably toggle your way to the Art Deco Cultural District Committee. The person in the city administration day-to-day who's focused on this is Justin Carr. So you can find Justin Carr and you can ask him. But this was work done by Kittleson, who's a traffic expert, who's part of the advisory committee for this committee. Frankly, the data they collected is interesting only because it shows what's possible. It was actually dated 2019 stuff, pre-COVID, et cetera. But we can see all kinds of things about who's coming to our city, their demographics, where they're from, et cetera, just by simply measuring cell phone activity present in the Art Deco Cultural District or Miami Beach more broadly. It's very interesting in terms of what it tells us is possible as compared to that we learned something revolutionary. But again, Justin Carr is the guy in the city. You can find your way to him. He'll give you the answer to the question where it's recorded.
Israel has really mastered the, using that cell phone data to be effective in terms of like getting people vaccinated and, during COVID, if you had your cell phone and you were even near somebody, else that if you were within socially distanced, like you got like an alert on your phone, which I think is an invasion. The ACLU would not like that. It's an invasion of our privacy. But I do think
These,
that's
look, these are complicated, issues legally. I want to add one more thing. Also recorded is a subsequent presentation to the committee done by Jerome Barth and another firm, Gale, about activating public places that they've done around the world. As we begin to think about the last question you asked is what should we do in terms of activation? They're talking about how cities transformed themselves by the activations that they created in those communities. And we've been mostly passive, not entirely.
we need
where
to
we could be much
outsource.
more active.
We can't do it in-house. I think like we need to outsource this type of programming to a group that only does this, that markets to certain groups, that brings in great cultural. I mean, we should go to these places that have these cities that have done that, find out who's doing it there, and then find a team to come in and actually do that, which would be expensive, but I think would be well worth it. I want to read some of these comments. George Gonzalez says, I propose a toll that would be charged just like SunPass. The toll can be increased by the volume of people entering the beach, like a congestion charge. I get that. And can also be used as a license plate reader. George, it's interesting that you say that. We actually went to the Department of Transportation, but we have Republican governors right now, and they do not believe in taxing our residents. Now, some barrier islands on the West Coast do have tolls, and I would be all for a toll. The Broad Causeway, which is privately owned, does have tolls, but we'd have to get permission from the state of Florida. And right now, I don't think that our city has a very good relationship with Tallahassee overall. And you guys can figure out why. The mayor has criticized. I know you want me to be I'm trying to be diplomatic, Jonathan, so that but the mayor has criticized nationally the governor. The governor does not like the mayor, and so they are sparring, and therefore we have no compassion from Tallahassee right now, which is something that we need to do. We need to repair that relationship, because I do believe that governor will be reelected, and I think that if he was working with us instead of against us, it would be a great thing. Okay, final, number 12. Explore approaches to controlling transient lodger abuses. We told them, if we can't regulate Airbnb, what can we do? And I think you touched on that. Only we can't because we're preempted by the state, correct?
Well, again, it's a legal question, but there are constraints that are imposed on us by the state, which make it difficult. But I will say this, by the way, one quick comment on your last comment, which is in the MBU presentation I participated in. Mayor Gilbert indicated that he and the governor spoke frankly about additional law enforcement resources during our most challenging period. The two of them spoke, and the governor did deliver state police resources to supplement the county and the city resources that we had. In terms of the short-term rental thing, look, I know at the Betsy, and true of any hotel, we have code enforcement, we have health inspectors, state, city, they show up whenever they want to show up, they check us out, we've got fire laws, we've got fire inspections. The reality is many of these places that we're talking about, not all, many of them have nothing. Okay, so when we think it's a public safety matter, it's an issue and a concern. It would seem at the very least that we should be able to create some kind of framework that causes people to have to maintain certain basic services at a location. Having said that, we also live in a world where there are residents who own such properties, residents of ours, because this is the complexity question. Not everyone's on one side or the other. We have residents who own these individual units who don't want the city to get in the way of letting them rent them out freely. And but I think there's a pretty common view that in general at the moment, by the way, when you think about curfew, by the way, hundreds and hundreds of those young men and women, by the way, not some of them not so young, who were challenging us during the spring break period, were staying in short-term rentals in the historic MXC. So
yeah, but you have to ask yourself,
go away. They were staying here.
They're coming to stay in the short-term rentals because we have a party circus-like atmosphere, but that curfew did shut it down. You should invite Governor DeSantis to stay at the Betsy during Memorial Day weekend or spring break next year and let him walk the streets. And that would be very useful, because if we really are one of the biggest dollar revenue generators in 33139 in the entire state of Florida, then the governor should see what's going on, and maybe then he would consider changing some of the laws. I think that, the legislators did not want to change any of the laws in prisons until when they went and they visited the prisons, they saw that there was no air conditioning, that there were deplorable conditions. And once the legislators were educated and actually experienced it, then they could get behind the deprivatization of our prisons in the state of Florida. So stuff like that actually does work.
Well, I'm probably precluded from giving them a free room, but by them, not by me. But I'd be delighted to have any executive branch or legislative branch person from Tallahassee come and stay at the Betsy and knock themselves out on Ocean Drive to understand it better.
Well, we should definitely speak to somebody on the commission, maybe the mayor and the commissioners, extend an invitation to the governor and his cabinet members to come down to the state, come down and stay on Ocean Drive for the evening, enjoy the Betsy Hotel, and have a nice walk around Loomis Park.
And I do have to say this, sorry, little editorial comment here, which is the other thing that they would be reminded of is that within 15 minutes of the Betsy, again, not highlighting the Betsy, but wherever we are, is the Bass, the Wolfsonian, Jewish Museum, this Holocaust Museum, the Miami Beach Urban Studios, the New World Symphony, and every single great chef in the world. So when we're like wringing our hands about how terrible it is, it's also amazing what's going on around us. The Bulgari announcing a hotel, the Amman announcing a hotel. There's astonishing stuff. We have become the #1 tourist destination in the country.
No, the richest people in the world
have to harness that, somehow to get to a better place.
So Susan Clarendon asks, is a recording of this interview available on? Yes, on my Facebook page. This was a long, on my Facebook page, Kristen Rosen Gonzalez, and I'm going to share it all over the Facebook group so that everybody can enjoy Jonathan's wisdom and insight. There's nobody who has clocked more hours working on Ocean Drive than you.
Thanks, Kristen. Try not to stumble.
So to finish this, and by the way, Jonathan and I kind of had it out, and he never loses his cool. And you actually kind of raised your voice and turned red the other day, which I thought was good. We were having like an animated, dialogue about this, realistically. To end, thank you for the work that you're doing on Ocean Drive. I think Memorial Day will be a test for this. I would love to see if we could get the governor here on Memorial Day. Is there anything at the Betsy that you would like to plug that's coming up? Because the Betsy has wonderful cultural events that are free to everyone in Miami-Dade County. And this is a countywide platform. So is there anything coming up that you think is interesting that everybody should, everything, I'm sure, but.
Sure. Well, first let me say thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And we did have an intense exchange. And it was mostly because I'm anxious for everybody, including myself, by the way, to be armed with as many of the facts as possible, because this stuff that we're talking about is very emotional stuff. We all live here, and I don't like to brand people as good guys or bad guys unless I actually kind of know what they're doing.
But there are good guys and bad guys, Jonathan. There are. And I think those bad guys need to be held accountable.
I'm with you completely. I'm
shamed into following our rules and our laws, and it's not going to be easy. And let's see. Elizabeth Scarlett wanted to know, when is the next meeting of the ADCD?
It's a week from Friday.
A week from Friday. Again, Miami Beach Kelly Zoom. Is it on Zoom?
It's Zoom. The city, whatever the city uses, I think that's Zoom. Justin Carr, K-A-R-R, Justin Carr, K-A-R-R is your guy. He'll point you in the right direction. I'm saying they're good guys and bad guys. And by the way, they exist all over the place. I just want people to be armed with the facts. And now I'll tell you quickly that we have 9 galleries at the Betsy. There's a lot of beautiful Miami Beach related stuff that we're hanging on our walls at the moment. Don't have time to tell you about them today. Except we have an extraordinary citizen of Miami Beach who lives a couple blocks from the Betsy named Barbara Hulaniki.
I thought you were going to say Dershowitz.
Pardon me?
Nothing, just making a joke. Okay.
Sorry. And so come and see the art. Culture Crawl, City Culture Crawl is Thursday evening. So the cultural institutions around town are open, and we, even though we're a hotel, are, I think, the only hotel on that list. So you can come by, doors will be open late, people can check out the art and music. And actually, this is National Poetry Month. And of course, the iconic poetry festival, National Poetry Festival that we all own is O Miami, which is the Miami-based festival that's nationally recognized. The Betsy is the home of O Miami. And on Culture Crawl night, there will be a poetry reading under the orb I hope you all know the orb.
Would you like to end by reciting your favorite poem, Jonathan?
No, I wouldn't, because I'll embarrass myself.
Okay.
But we'll be projecting on the orb. For those of you who hadn't come to the orb is the egg-like thing that connects our two buildings. It appears at the intersection of Ocean Court and 14th Place. People come from all over the world to take their picture underneath the orb, which is, by the way, one of the great things a city can do is create places for people to go and be happy. And that's one of those places.
The Betsy Hotel did invest money in the alley, actually came up with a beautiful pizzeria, ice cream shop in the alley. They have wonderful walls of poetic words, and then there is the orb. So when we do invest in our streets and alleys and light them and make them artistic, they can be transformative. And I would love for the city to invest dollars in that also, which I think might make a big difference moving forward. Hey, Jonathan, thank you for doing this interview with me. Wasn't too bad, right?
Thank you. No, it wasn't bad. It's always a pleasure.
It's like having lunch at the Betsy.
Thank you so much. Good luck with Cafe Bernie. All the
best.
best.
All right. Thank you. Cafe Bernie coming soon, April 22nd. Bye, everybody.